I had been waiting 20 years for a call that never came. 20 years of sending gifts that vanished into the void. 20 years of dialing numbers that rang and rang until a robotic voice told me to leave a message. And I left messages. Dozens, hundreds of messages over the course of 2 decades. Happy birthday, Jennifer. I miss you so much. Christopher, it is Mom. I just wanted to know how you are doing. I have been thinking about you both all day. I hope you are doing well. Sending you a big hug. I love you. But never, not once in 20 years, did I receive a reply. Not a call back, not a text message, not even a cold, distant email. Nothing. Silence had become my only companion, the constant response to every desperate attempt to keep alive a relationship that my children had decided to bury without even telling me to my face. This morning I woke up in my small one-bedroom apartment, the same place I have lived alone since my husband died 23 years ago. The walls are covered with photographs of when Jennifer and Christopher were children. There is Jennifer in her pink elementary school graduation dress, Christopher in his Little League baseball uniform, smiling that smile that used to light up my entire world. Photos of birthdays, of Christmases, of trips to the Jersey Shore we took when we still had very little money but a lot of love. Oh, or so I thought. Every morning I get up and look at those photos, and every morning I wonder at what moment I ceased to exist for them. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat in front of the window, looking out at the street. Today is Wednesday, an ordinary day. Just another day in this life of waiting that no longer expects anything. I checked my phone out of habit. 0 missed calls. 0 messages. Same as always. I opened my photo gallery and looked at the pictures of the gifts I have sent over these years. I always take a picture before mailing them, as if I needed proof that I tried, that I did not give up, that I continued to be their mother, even though they stopped being my children. Last year I sent Jennifer a cashmere shawl that cost me $250. I never knew if she received it. 6 months ago, I sent Christopher a Mont Blanc pen for his office, $300 that I spent from my small Social Security check. He never mentioned receiving it. Every birthday, every Christmas, every major holiday, I sent something. And every time, the silence returned the certainty that, for them, I no longer existed. I dressed in black slacks and a simple white blouse. At 69 years old, I do not care about impressing anyone anymore. But I still maintain my dignity. I went out for a walk in the park near my building, something I do every morning so as not to go crazy inside these 4 walls. I saw other women my age walking with their grandchildren, laughing, taking photos, sharing ice cream cones. I never met my grandchildren. I know Jennifer has 2, a boy and a girl. I found out on Facebook 4 years ago, back when I still checked their profiles before they blocked me. Christopher has a daughter. I also learned that through social media, from the crumbs of information I could gather before they completely slammed that door shut too. 3 grandchildren who do not know my name, who do not know I exist, who grew up thinking their grandmother is simply not around. I returned home around noon and found an envelope in my mailbox. It was an invitation. An elegant invitation, printed on thick ivory cardstock with gold lettering. I opened it with trembling hands. It was from Jennifer, a formal invitation to her 45th birthday party. This Saturday, at her house, from 6 to 10 in the evening, dress code, formal. I felt something move in my chest, something that had been dormant for so long I had almost forgotten its existence. Hope. After 20 years of silence, my daughter was inviting me to her party. I sat on the sofa and read the invitation over and over again, looking for some personal message, some handwritten note. There was nothing, just the formal invitation, printed, impersonal. But it was something. It was more than I had had in 2 decades. I spent the next 3 days preparing for that party as if it were the most important event of my life. I went to the department store and bought a wine-colored dress that made me look elegant, but not extravagant. I did not want to draw too much attention. I just wanted to be presentable, to look like a mother they could feel proud of. I spent $200 on the dress, almost a quarter of my monthly pension, but I did not care. I also bought a gift, a set of sterling silver flatware engraved with the initials of Jennifer and her husband, $600. All the money I had saved for months for emergencies, but this was an emergency of a different kind. It was my chance to exist again for my children, to remind them that I was still here, that I had always been here. Waiting. Saturday arrived and I got ready with care. I applied light makeup. I put on the pearl necklace my mother gave me over 40 years ago. I slipped on the low-heeled black pumps I reserved for special occasions. I looked in the mirror and saw an older woman. Yes, with wrinkles around the eyes and gray hair, I no longer bothered to die. But I also saw a woman who still had dignity, who still stood tall despite everything. I took a taxi because I do not drive anymore. My eyesight is not as good as it used to be. During the ride, I practiced in my mind what I would say to them. Hello, Jennifer. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Christopher, it is so good to see you. I have missed you both so much. Simple phrases a mother should be able to say without rehearsing, but I needed to prepare because I no longer knew how to talk to my own children. The taxi dropped me off in front of a huge mansion in one of the most exclusive suburbs of the city. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the lit-up house, listening to the murmur of voices and music coming from inside. Jennifer had prospered. That was evident. Her husband, Robert Stone, was a successful businessman, and she had become a socialite. I knew this because sometimes, when the loneliness became unbearable, I would search her name on the internet and read articles about charity galas she attended, about her membership in exclusive country clubs, about her perfect life that did not include me. I took a deep breath and walked toward the front door. Before I could ring the bell, the door opened and a housekeeper greeted me. Come in, please, she told me, pointing toward the back of the house. The party is in the backyard garden. I walked down a long hallway, decorated with modern art and furniture that probably cost more than everything I owned. I reached the garden and stopped dead in my tracks. There were at least 50 people, elegant tables with white linens and fresh floral centerpieces. Uniformed servers circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A full bar with a professional bartender. Live jazz music. It was a magazine-perfect party. Expensive, spectacular. And I, with my $200 dress and my gift that had cost me my entire savings, felt like an imposter who had walked into the wrong venue. I looked for Jennifer in the crowd and found her laughing with a group of women, all dressed in designer clothes, all with that glow of money and success that I never had. I approached slowly, feeling how every step required more courage than I possessed. Jennifer saw me, and her laughter stopped abruptly. For a second, just a second, I saw something in her eyes I could not decipher. Then she smiled, that perfect social smile they must teach in country clubs. Mom, you said you would come, she said, kissing the air near my cheek. The women around her looked at me with curiosity. This is my mother, Margaret, Jennifer announced with a tone that sounded more like an apology than an introduction. The women nodded politely, but none made the effort to start a conversation with me. Jennifer excused herself, saying she had to greet other guests, and left me standing there, alone in the middle of a crowd of strangers who clearly belonged to a world I would never be part of. I looked for a place to sit and found an empty table in a corner of the garden, far from the center of the celebration. From there I could observe everything without getting in anyone's way, which was exactly what seemed expected of me. I saw Christopher enter the garden from the house. My son, 42 years old, a successful corporate lawyer, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than $2,000. He came in laughing with a group of men surrounding him as if he were someone truly important. I watched him move among the guests with that confidence that only money and success provide. He saw me. I know he saw me because our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and then he simply turned his head and continued his conversation as if I were just another garden chair, invisible, non-existent. That is how I felt after 20 years of unanswered calls, and that is how he confirmed that I effectively was. A server approached and offered me champagne. I took it just to have something in my hands, something to do with them besides wringing them in my lap. I took a sip, and the liquid tasted bitter to me, although it was probably the expensive kind, the kind these people drank without thinking twice. I looked around and saw entire families talking, laughing, hugging. I saw an older woman, probably my age, surrounded by what appeared to be her children and grandchildren, all attentive to every word she said. I felt a pang of pain so intense in my chest that I had to close my eyes for a moment. That was what I had dreamed of. That was what I thought I would have when I raised my children, when I sacrificed everything for them, when I worked 2 jobs so they could go to good schools, when I stayed up entire nights taking care of them when they were sick. The memories began to flood in without me being able to stop them. Jennifer was 8 years old when she had pneumonia. We spent 3 nights in the hospital, and I did not move from her side for a second. I sang her songs so she would sleep. I read her stories. I promised her everything was going to be all right. When we finally left the hospital, she hugged me and told me I was the best mom in the world. Where was that little girl now? Where was my daughter who hugged me and needed me? Christopher was 12 years old when his father died. It was a sudden heart attack. Without warnings, without time for goodbyes, my husband left and left us alone. Me with 2 children to raise and debts to pay. Christopher cried for weeks. Every night he would come into my room and lie down next to me because he was afraid I would leave too. I hugged him and promised him I would never abandon him, that I would always be there for him. How ironic. I kept my promise. It was they who abandoned me. The distancing was not overnight. It was gradual, like a silent disease that consumes everything without you realizing it until it is too late. When Jennifer got married 18 years ago, I was still part of her life. I was at the wedding. I helped with the preparations. I cried when I saw her walk down the aisle. But after the wedding, the calls became spaced out. Once a week turned into once every 2 weeks, then once a month, then nothing. When I asked her if everything was okay, she always had an excuse. I am very busy, Mom. You know how it is being a newlywed. Robert and I are traveling a lot for his work. I have a lot of things to do. There was always something more important than me. Christopher got married 15 years ago. He did not even invite me to the wedding. I found out 3 months later when a distant cousin mentioned it in passing. Mom thought I already knew. I called him crying, demanding an explanation. His answer was cold, mechanical, as if he were talking to an annoyed client and not his mother. It was a small, intimate wedding. We did not want to do something big. You know Sarah and I are private people. Do not take it personally. But how could I not take it personally? He was my son. It was his wedding, and he did not even consider that I should be there. That was the first time I understood that something had fundamentally changed in our relationship, that it was no longer a simple phase of drifting apart, but a conscious decision to erase me from their lives. The birthdays were the worst. Every year, without fail, I sent gifts. I researched what they might like. I spent money I did not have. I packed each gift with care. I wrote long cards telling them how much I loved them, how much I missed them. I never received a thank you, not a message confirming the packages had arrived. Nothing. 5 years ago, I sent Jennifer an Italian wool coat I saw in a boutique that I knew she would love. It cost me $400. $400 I took from my savings. Money I should have used to fix the leak in my bathroom. I sent it with a letter telling her I had thought of her when I saw it, that it reminded me of when she was little and loved elegant coats. Weeks passed, then months. I never knew if she received it. For Christopher's birthday 3 years ago, I bought him a special edition of his favorite childhood book. It was a collector's edition, with original illustrations, bound in leather. It cost me $350, and I had to search in 3 different bookstores. I remembered how he loved that book when he was 10, how he asked me to read it to him over and over before sleeping. I thought maybe that gift would remind him who I was, who I had been to him. I sent it with a note that simply said, "Do you remember how much you liked this book? I love you very much, son. Mom." I never knew if it reached his hands or if it ended up in the trash unopened. The silence was my only answer, as always. Christmases were particularly painful. I spent the holidays completely alone in my apartment, watching Christmas movies on television and trying not to think that Jennifer and Christopher were celebrating with their own families without even sending me a text. 4 Christmases ago, I dared to show up at Jennifer's house unannounced. I rang the doorbell, and she opened the door herself. The surprise on her face quickly turned into barely concealed annoyance. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked me without inviting me in. Behind her I could see a huge Christmas tree, elegant decorations. I heard children laughing. My grandchildren were there, just feet away from me, and I did not even know their names. "I just wanted to say hello, give them a gift," I told her, holding a bag with toys I had bought for the children. Jennifer took the bag without looking inside. "Thanks, Mom, but we are in the middle of a family dinner. We will talk another day." "Okay." And she closed the door. I stood on her porch, for I do not know how long, staring at that closed door, listening to the laughter coming from inside. Family dinner. I was her family, and I was on the outside. Excluded, rejected, invisible. I walked to the nearest bus stop because I did not have money for a taxi. It was Christmas Eve and the cold chilled me to the bone. I got to my apartment past midnight, took off my shoes, and sat on the sofa in the dark. I did not turn on the small tree I had put in the corner of the living room. I did not put on Christmas music. I just stayed there, in the silence, finally understanding that it did not matter how much I insisted. It did not matter how many gifts I sent. It did not matter how many times I called them. They had decided that I was no longer part of their lives. I tried to talk to them about this only once. It was 2 years ago. I managed to get Christopher to answer the phone, probably because I called from an unknown number and he thought it was work-related. "Son, I need to talk to you," I told him with a trembling voice. "I need to understand what happened. Why have you shut me out of your lives?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he sighed, that sigh of annoyance people use when they have to deal with something they consider a waste of time. "Mom, do not be dramatic. We do not have you out of anything. We are simply busy. We have our own lives, our own families. We cannot be calling you all the time." "But I do not ask for all the time," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I only ask to hear from you every once in a while, to be able to see my grandchildren, to be part of your lives, even if just a little." "Look, Mom," he interrupted me with a tone of impatience. "We are not children anymore. We do not need you hovering over us all the time. You did your job raising us, and we appreciate it. But now you need to understand that we have our own paths. It is not personal. It is just life. It is not personal." Those words echoed in my head for days. How could it not be personal for your own children to erase you from their lives? How could it not be personal for them to deliberately ignore you for years? How could it not be personal for them to treat you as if you were an annoying obligation and not the woman who brought them into the world and sacrificed everything for them? That conversation ended with Christopher telling me he had to hang up because he was going into a meeting. We did not speak again after that. 2 years have passed, and that was our last exchange of words until today. Sitting at that garden table, with my glass of champagne untouched and my gift still in my purse, I understood something with brutal clarity. I had not been invited to this party because Jennifer suddenly remembered she had a mother. I had not been invited out of love or a genuine desire to see me. There was something else behind this invitation, something I could not see yet but could feel in the air, in the furtive glances, in the atmosphere charged with falseness. I watched my 2 children move among the guests, perfect hosts, smiling, successful, surrounded by people who admired them, and I realized that for them, I was just an uncomfortable reminder of a past they preferred to forget. The music kept playing, and the conversations flowed around me like a river from which I was completely excluded. I took another sip of champagne and let the memories keep coming, each one more painful than the last. I remembered the day Jennifer graduated from college. It was 22 years ago, just before everything started to crumble. I was in the front row, clapping louder than anyone when they called her name. After the ceremony, I hugged her and told her how proud I was of her. She smiled, hugged me back, and told me, "Mom, everything I am is thanks to you." Those words sustained me for years. I clung to them every time the silence became unbearable. But now, seeing the woman she had become, I wondered if she had ever truly meant it, or if they were just empty words said in moments of emotion. When Jennifer got pregnant with her first child, I found out 6 months later. It was not she who told me. It was a neighbor of hers who casually saw me at the supermarket and congratulated me on becoming a grandmother soon. I froze in the middle of the cereal aisle, smiling like an idiot while the woman kept talking about how excited I must be. When I got home, I called Jennifer immediately. She answered after the 10th ring. Her voice sounded tired. "Daughter, I just found out you are pregnant," I told her, trying not to sound accusatory. "Why didn't you tell me?" There was an awkward silence. "I was going to tell you, Mom," she finally replied. "It is just that I have been very busy with doctors and all that. You know how it is." No, I did not know how it was, because she never included me in anything. I asked her when the baby was due, if she needed help with anything, if I could go visit her. She gave me short, evasive answers. "There is still time, Mom. We will see. I am fine. Do not worry." When my grandson was finally born, I found out 2 weeks later. 2 weeks. My first grandchild had been in the world for 14 days, and I had no idea. This time, it was Christopher who accidentally mentioned something in a text message he sent me by mistake. A message clearly meant for someone else saying, "Good thing Jennifer and the baby are already home." I replied immediately asking what baby, when had he been born, what was his name. He called me an hour later. His voice had that tone of annoyance that was already familiar to me. "Mom, I thought Jennifer had told you. The baby was born 2 weeks ago. His name is Daniel. Everyone is fine." I begged him to let me go meet my grandson. He told me he would talk to Jennifer and let me know. 3 months passed before they finally allowed me to visit them. 3 months in which I insisted, begged. I called every week until finally Jennifer gave in, just to stop me from bothering them. When I arrived at her house that day, with gifts I had bought with the little I had, she met me at the door with the baby in her arms. She did not invite me in. She simply stood there, letting me see the child from the threshold. "He is beautiful," I told her with tears in my eyes. "Can I hold him?" "He is asleep, Mom. Better not wake him up," she replied. "I just wanted you to meet him. Here are the gifts," I told her, extending the bags. "Thanks. I will look at them later," she said, taking them without looking at them. "I have to go, Mom. The baby needs to eat soon." And that was it. My first meeting with my grandson lasted less than 5 minutes, standing at the door of my daughter's house as if I were a door-to-door salesperson. I cried all the way back home. I cried for that boy who would never truly know me, who would grow up without knowing who his grandmother was, who probably would not even know my name. When her second child was born 2 years later, I did not even bother waiting for them to tell me. I checked her Facebook obsessively until I saw the photos of the birth. A girl, my granddaughter. I sent flowers to the hospital, but I never knew if she received them. I sent gifts to her house, expensive baby clothes that took me months to save up for. I never received confirmation that they had arrived. It was like sending messages into the void, screams into the silence that never got an answer. With Christopher, it was the same, or worse. His wife Sarah got pregnant, and I found out through a social media post that someone shared. They had not even given me the news directly. I called Christopher, but he did not answer. I sent him congratulatory messages. Nothing. I tried to contact Sarah directly, but she had blocked me on all platforms. It was as if I were a virus they needed to protect themselves from, a threat to be kept away. When my granddaughter on Christopher's side was born, no one told me anything. I found out 3 months later, when a cousin posted a family photo where the baby appeared. 3 months. My family celebrating a new member, and I did not even know she existed. I tried to visit them. I went to their house unannounced, just like I had done with Jennifer. I rang the doorbell several times, but no one opened, even though I knew they were inside, because I saw movement behind the curtains. I stood there like a fool for half an hour, knocking and knocking, until a neighbor came out and asked me if I needed help. "I am waiting for my son," I explained. Feeling the humiliation burn my cheeks, the woman looked at me with pity. "I think no one is home, ma'am," she told me kindly, even though we both knew it was a lie. I left there with my heart broken into pieces, understanding that my own children preferred to hide from me than open the door and talk for 5 minutes. My grandchildren's birthdays were another kind of torture. I sent gifts religiously for each one: toys, clothes, books. I spent what I did not have trying to buy even a small space in their lives, but I never knew if my grandchildren opened those gifts, if they liked them, if they even knew who sent them. Probably Jennifer and Christopher received them and stored them or gave them away without telling the children who they came from. It was easier that way. Easier to erase me completely than to explain why the grandmother they never see keeps sending things. 2 years ago, I sent Daniel, my oldest grandson, a bicycle for his 8th birthday. It cost me $500. $500 that took me 6 months to save. I sent it with a card that said, "To my dear grandson, I hope you enjoy this bicycle as much as your mom enjoyed hers when she was your age." I love you even though we do not know each other. Your grandmother Margaret. I never knew if Daniel received that bicycle. I never knew if he read my card. Probably Jennifer threw it in the trash before he could see it. It was easier to maintain the narrative that I simply did not exist, that for some mysterious reason Grandma was not present in their lives. Easier than admitting that they had consciously excluded me, that they had made the deliberate decision to cut me out of the family. I looked toward where Jennifer was now, surrounded by her elegant friends, laughing at something someone had said. I wondered if she ever thought of me, if ever, in the middle of her perfect and busy days, she stopped for a second to remember the woman who had raised her, who had worked 2 jobs to give her everything she needed, who had sacrificed every day of her life for her. I remembered the nights I worked as a cashier at a supermarket and then cleaning offices to be able to pay for the private school where Jennifer wanted to study. I remembered how my hands would get red and swollen from scrubbing floors so much, but I kept going because I wanted my daughter to have opportunities I never had. I remembered when Christopher needed special tutoring in math because he was struggling in school. Those tutoring sessions cost $100 an hour. I added a 3rd job, selling cosmetics door to door on weekends, just to be able to pay that tutor. My feet hurt so much there were nights I could not sleep. But I did it because he was my son, because I wanted him to succeed, to go far. And he went far. Both of them went far. Jennifer with her mansion and her rich husband and her elegant parties. Christopher with his law firm and his $2,000 suit and his perfect life. They went so far that they left me behind, as if I were roadkill, something that had served its purpose and was now no longer necessary. I watched them both move among their guests, and I felt something new besides the pain. I felt rage, a cold, clear rage that was beginning to wake up after 20 years of sleeping under layers of sadness and denial. I had spent 2 decades begging for their attention, pleading for crumbs of love, sending gifts as if I could buy a place in their hearts. And all that time they had been ignoring me deliberately, consciously, cruelly. A waiter passed by and left a tray of canapés on my table. I looked at them without appetite. Expensive food served on elegant plates for people who probably would not even appreciate it because they were accustomed to this level of luxury. I thought of my almost empty refrigerator at home, of how I had to calculate every grocery purchase so my pension would last the whole month. I thought of the $500 I spent on that bicycle that probably ended up given away or in the basement gathering dust. I thought of all the dollars I had sent in gifts over the course of 20 years, money I should have used for myself, to make my life more comfortable so I would not have to worry so much every time an electric or water bill arrived. The rage kept growing. It was not an explosive rage. It was not the kind of rage that makes you scream or break things. It was a cold, calculating rage, the rage of someone who is finally seeing the truth with total clarity. My children had not forgotten me accidentally. They were not too busy without realizing it. They had actively chosen to erase me from their lives. They had chosen not to answer my calls. They had chosen not to reply to my messages. They had chosen to keep their children away from me. They had chosen to close the door in my face, literally and figuratively. And I, like a fool, had kept insisting, begging, sending smoke signals, hoping that someday they would remember I existed. But today, sitting at this party where clearly I did not belong, where I did not even know why I had been invited after so long, something changed inside me. Something broke definitively, but not in the painful way from before. It broke in a liberating way. I realized that I no longer wanted to keep begging. I no longer wanted to keep being invisible to the 2 people who were supposed to love me more than anyone in the world. I no longer wanted to keep living in this agony of constant hope and guaranteed disappointment. I was still lost in my thoughts when I saw Robert, Jennifer's husband, walk toward a small stage they had set up in the center of the garden. He was a tall man, about 50, with that air of authority that money and power give. He took a glass of champagne and tapped the crystal lightly with a spoon. The sound resonated throughout the garden, and little by little, the conversations died down. All the guests turned toward him with attention. I stayed where I was, in my distant corner, feeling my heart start to beat faster without knowing exactly why. "Good evening, everyone." Robert began with that voice trained for public speaking. "Thank you for joining us on this very special day to celebrate my wonderful wife. The guests applauded, and Jennifer went up to the stage next to him, radiant in her champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than I earned in 3 months. They kissed while everyone applauded, and I felt something twist in my stomach. Robert continued talking about how lucky he was to have Jennifer in his life, about everything they had built together, about their plans for the future. I listened halfway, still trying to understand why they had invited me after so long. Then Robert said something that made me pay complete attention. "I also want to take this moment to make an important announcement," he said, looking at the crowd. "As many of you know, Jennifer and I have been working on a very special project." He paused dramatically, and I saw Christopher approach the stage with a smile on his face. My son went up the steps and stood next to his sister and brother-in-law. The three of them looked perfect up there, like a magazine photograph of successful, happy people. "We are excited to announce," Robert continued, "that we have acquired a beautiful piece of land on the coast, with an ocean view, where we will build a beach house for the whole family. A house where we can gather, create memories, strengthen our family bonds." The guests applauded enthusiastically. I sat paralyzed in my chair. Family. He had said family, but I did not even know about this project. No one had mentioned anything to me, obviously, because I was not part of that family they were talking about. Christopher took the microphone. As the family attorney, he continued with that professional tone he used. "I have been coordinating all legal aspects of this acquisition, and I want to tell you that this beach house is not just a property. It is a legacy we will leave for our children and our children's children. A place where the Stone family will gather for generations." More applause. I felt the cold rage that had started to awaken become more intense. The Stone family. I was Margaret Ross. I had given them that maiden name, but clearly I was not included in this legacy. Jennifer took the microphone from her brother's hands. And to make this even more special, she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes, "We want this investment to be something we all participate in." Then something happened that left me frozen. Jennifer searched for me with her gaze among all the guests. When our eyes met, her smile grew wider, but there was something in it that gave me goosebumps. "Mom," she said, pointing at me, "why don't you come up here with us?" All the guests turned to look at me, 50 pairs of eyes watching me while I remained seated, not knowing what to do. "Come on, Mom," insisted Jennifer. "Do not be shy." My legs barely responded, but I managed to stand up. I walked toward the stage, feeling every gaze nailed into my back. I went up the steps carefully, my low-heeled shoes making noise against the wood. When I reached the top, Jennifer put an arm around my shoulders in a gesture that might seem affectionate to anyone who did not know our history. "Look," she said, addressing the guests. "Here is my mother, Margaret. After so many years, she is finally here with us." There was something in the way she said those words that sounded false, rehearsed. Robert continued speaking. "As I was saying, we want this house to be a family investment, and for that, we need all family members to contribute their share." My heart started beating even faster. Where was all this going? Christopher looked directly at me. "Mom, I know Dad left you the house where you lived with him, the house you sold a few years ago." I felt as if the ground moved beneath my feet. How did he know that? I had sold that house 5 years ago, when the maintenance became too expensive and I needed something smaller and manageable. With that money, I had bought my current apartment and had a small nest egg left. "We have been thinking," continued Jennifer, squeezing my shoulder harder than necessary, "that it would be wonderful if you could contribute with that money you have saved for this family investment. That way, you would have a part of the beach house too. You could visit us there, spend time with your grandchildren." Everything connected in my mind like a macabre puzzle. That is why they had invited me. That is why, after 20 years of absolute silence, I suddenly received an elegant invitation to this party. It was not because they missed me. It was not because they had finally realized they had a mother. It was because they needed my money. They needed the savings I had accumulated from the sale of the only property I owned. The house my husband and I bought together, where we raised our children, where we built a life. "How much money do you have from that sale, Mom?" Christopher asked, as if he were in a business meeting and not talking to his mother in front of 50 strangers. I could not speak. The words were stuck in my throat. Robert intervened with a smile that pretended to be kind. "Look, Margaret, I know this might take you by surprise, but think about it. It would be a way to secure your place in the family. an investment in your grandchildren's future. And of course, you could use the house whenever you wanted. It would be your house too. Lies. It was all lies. I could see it in their eyes, in the way they avoided looking at me directly, in how Jennifer had let go of my shoulder and now maintained physical distance, even though we were on the same stage. "We are putting in the majority," added Jennifer. "But we thought you would want to be part of this. After all, it is your family. Your family." Those words sounded hollow, coming from the mouth of someone who had not called me in 20 years, from someone who had closed the door in my face when I went to meet my grandson, from someone who had blocked my numbers, ignored my messages, returned my letters. Christopher pulled out a folder he had prepared. "I already have all the documents ready," he said with professional efficiency. "We just need you to sign here and make the wire transfer. We are talking about $200,000, right, Mom? That is more or less what you cleared from the sale of the house after buying your apartment." I still could not speak. $200,000. It was exactly the amount I had left. How did they know? How had they investigated my finances without me knowing? The answer was obvious. Christopher was a lawyer. He had contacts. There were ways to find these things out. They had planned all this meticulously. The invitation after 20 years, the elegant party, the public announcement, all designed to pressure me, to make me feel that I would finally have a place in the family if I just handed over my money. "Come on, Mom," said Jennifer with barely concealed impatience. "It is not that complicated. It is a good investment. The property value will go up. And besides, you will finally be able to bond with your grandchildren in a family environment. Is that not what you have always wanted?" Yes, it was what I had always wanted, but not like this. Not bought with my life savings, not as part of a calculated plan where I was just an ATM they finally decided to access after ignoring me for 2 decades. All the guests watched us expectantly. Some smiled, probably thinking they were witnessing a heartwarming family moment. Others looked uncomfortable, as if they could sense the real tension behind this charade. I looked at my 2 children, Jennifer with her expensive dress and her perfect life, Christopher with his designer suit and his professional attitude. I had raised them alone after their father died. I had fed them, clothed them, educated them. I had worked until my hands bled and my feet could not hold me up. I had sacrificed everything, absolutely everything, to give them opportunities. And now they were there, in front of me, asking for the last thing I had left. Not really asking for it, demanding it with this calculated public pressure. I looked at the folder Christopher held with the documents already prepared. How convenient that he had it already. How convenient that he knew exactly how much money I had. How convenient that they had chosen to do this in front of all these witnesses, betting that I would be too polite, too embarrassed, too desperate for their approval to say no. For 20 years, I had begged for their attention. I had pleaded for a call, for a visit, for any sign that they still cared. And in 20 years, they had never given me anything. Not their time, not their love, not even an occasional text message. But now that they needed something from me, now the family appeared. Now there were invitations and smiles and words about creating memories together. "So, Mom," asked Robert, breaking the silence that had stretched too long, "what do you say? Do you want to be part of this family project?" All eyes were on me, Jennifer, Christopher, Robert, and the 50 guests, waiting for my answer. At that moment, something inside me that had been cracking for years finally broke completely. But it did not break in a painful way. It broke in a liberating way, like chains falling off, like a door opening, like waking up from a long nightmare and realizing you finally have control. I looked at them all, one by one. I saw the barely concealed greed in Robert's eyes. I saw the impatience on Jennifer's face. I saw the cold calculation in Christopher's expression. And something inside me said, enough. Enough begging. Enough pleading. Enough sending gifts into the void. Enough unanswered calls. Enough pretending that things would change someday. Enough clinging to the hope that my children would remember who had raised them. Enough being invisible. Enough being convenient only when they needed something. Enough of everything. My breathing calmed. My heart stopped beating so fast. A cold, perfect clarity settled in my mind. I knew exactly what I had to do. I was not going to scream. I was not going to make a scene. I was not going to give them that satisfaction. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to disappear. But first, I had to get off this stage with what little dignity I had left. I took a deep breath and looked Jennifer directly in the eyes. "I need to think about it," I said with a voice that surprisingly came out firm and clear. "It is a lot of money and a major decision." I saw her face tense up. "Mom, there is not much to think about," she replied with a forced smile. "It is a unique opportunity. The property is going to be sold soon, and we need to close the deal this week." This week. Of course, the pressure was not accidental. Christopher intervened, taking a pen from his pocket. "Look, Mom, if you sign the documents now, I can process everything tomorrow morning. It is a simple process. I just need access to your account to make the transfer." Access to my account. They wanted access to my bank account. The only security I had left after a life of work and sacrifice. "No," I said simply. The word left my mouth before I could overthink it. The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable. Robert let out a nervous laugh. "What do you mean, no, Margaret? Do you not understand that this is for your own good too?" "For my own good," I repeated, feeling the cold rage become solid inside me. "For my own good would be if you had called me even once in 20 years. For my own good would be meeting my grandchildren. For my own good would be having been invited into your lives, and not just to this party when you need my money." Jennifer and Christopher's faces hardened. Some guests started murmuring among themselves. "Mom, do not do this here," Jennifer said through gritted teeth. "Do not make a scene." A scene. I was not the one who had organized this public ambush. I was not the one who had planned to humiliate me in front of 50 strangers. I was not the one who had investigated my finances behind my back. "Keep your voices down, please," Robert said, looking at the guests with discomfort. "We can talk about this in private." "There is nothing to talk about," I replied. "I am not going to sign anything. I am not going to give my money, and now I am going to leave." I stepped down from the stage without waiting for an answer. My legs were shaking, but they kept moving, one foot in front of the other. I heard Jennifer calling me, but I did not turn around. I heard footsteps following me, but I did not stop. I reached my table, grabbed my purse with the gift I would never deliver, and walked toward the garden exit. Christopher caught up to me before I reached the house. He grabbed my arm firmly. "You cannot leave like this, Mom," he said with a low, threatening voice. "Let go of me," I replied, trying to free my arm. "You need to understand something," he continued, without letting go. "That beach house is a smart investment. If you do not participate, do not expect to ever have access to it. Do not expect to come visit us there. Do not expect to be part of our family vacations. I do not expect anything from you," I said, looking directly at him. "I haven't expected anything for 20 years. And you know what? I finally understood it. You did not forget me. You chose to forget me. And I chose to stay begging like a fool. But that is over." Something in my tone must have surprised him, because he finally let go of my arm. "Mom?" he started to say, but I interrupted him. "Do not call me Mom. Mothers receive calls from their children. Mothers know their grandchildren. Mothers are part of their families' lives. I am not your mother. I am just someone with money that suddenly interests you." I turned around and kept walking. This time no one stopped me. I left that house, that perfect garden, that farce of a family celebration. I called a taxi from the street and waited under the lights of the entrance while the party continued inside as if nothing had happened. Probably Robert was already making another toast, distracting the guests, saving face. When the taxi arrived, I got in and gave my address to the driver. I looked out the window as we drove away from that lit-up mansion, and in that moment, with a clarity I had never had before, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was not going to keep begging. I was not going to keep waiting. I was not going to keep being the invisible mother who existed only when they needed her. I was going to disappear for real, completely. And when I did, it would be in such a way that they could never, ever find me or access what was mine. The taxi moved through the dark streets, and I felt like every mile that took me away from that house was a mile toward my freedom, toward my new life, toward the woman I should have been 20 years ago, when the silence began. But better late than never. I arrived at my apartment past midnight. I took off the wine-colored dress and folded it carefully, knowing I would never wear it again. I put on my old robe and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I had no intention of drinking. I just needed something warm in my hands, while my mind worked with a clarity I had never experienced before. I did not feel pain. I did not feel sadness. I felt pure, cold determination. I took out a notebook and started writing a list. It was not an emotional list. It was practical, methodical, definitive. First, change my name legally. Second, sell the apartment. Third, close all my bank accounts and open new ones at another bank. Fourth, cancel my phone number. Fifth, delete all my social media. Sixth, contact a lawyer to revise my will. The list went on. Every point was a step toward my complete disappearance. I was not going to leave trails. I was not going to leave doors open. I was not going to give them the chance to find me when they needed something from me again. I stayed up all night, planning every detail. When Monday dawned, I dressed in comfortable clothes and left my apartment with a clear purpose. My first stop was the office of an attorney I found online, one who had no connection to Christopher or his professional circle. She was a woman in her 50s named Sarah Parker. I explained my situation without getting into too many emotional details. Just the facts. I want to change my full name, I told her, and I need to do it in a way that is hard to trace. Sarah looked at me with eyes that had seen many stories. She did not judge me. She did not ask me if I was sure. She simply nodded and began explaining the process. It will take approximately 3 months, she told me. We need to file a petition with the court, publish the change in the official newspaper, wait the legal period in case there are objections. 3 months. I could wait 3 months. I had waited 20 years for love that never came. I could wait 3 months for my freedom. And the will? I asked. I also need to change it. Sarah pulled out forms and started asking questions. Do you have current beneficiaries? Yes, I replied. My 2 children. But I want to remove them completely. I want everything I have to go to a charity when I die. She wrote everything down without making comments. I also need to review any document where they might appear as emergency contacts, power of attorney, or insurance beneficiaries. I want to remove them from everything. Sarah looked up. That is very definitive, Mrs. Ross. Are you absolutely sure? I looked her straight in the eye. I haven't existed for them for 20 years. It is time for them to stop existing for me too. Only this time it will be legal and permanent. She nodded and continued taking notes. We will review everything. Bank accounts, insurance, property, medical documents. We are going to ensure they have no access to anything that is yours. I paid her a retainer of $1,000 and left with a folder full of documents I had to sign. My next stop was the bank. I asked to speak with the manager and explained that I needed to close all my accounts and open new ones at a completely different bank. The man looked at me confused. Is there a problem with our service, ma'am? No, I replied. I just need to make changes in my financial life. It is personal. He helped me close the accounts. He gave me cashier's checks with the money I had in each one. $215,000 in total. Everything I had left from the sale of the house, plus the small savings I had accumulated over years. I left there and went directly to another bank on the other side of the city. I opened new accounts in my current name, knowing that in 3 months I would change them to the new name. I deposited all the money and asked that there be no public information associated with these accounts. I returned home exhausted, but satisfied with the progress of the first day. Over the next few weeks, I continued executing my plan with surgical precision. I hired a real estate agency to sell my apartment. I told them I needed to sell fast and was willing to lower the price a bit. In 2 weeks, I had 3 offers. I accepted the best one, a young family that paid me $180,000. It wasn't everything the apartment was worth, but I didn't care. What mattered was speed and closing that chapter. Meanwhile, I looked for a new place to live, something small, in another city, where no one knew me. I found a 1-bedroom condo in a coastal town 4 hours away. It was quiet, had an ocean view, and cost much less than what I was currently paying. I started packing my things slowly, The hardest part was deciding what to do with the photographs, those damn photographs covering my walls, reminding me every day of what I had lost. Jennifer as a child smiling at me, Christopher in his school uniform. Christmases we celebrated together, happy birthdays, vacations at the beach when we still had little, but were united. I took every frame and removed the photos. I looked at them one by one, allowing myself to feel the pain one last time. Then I put them all in a box. I did not throw them away. I could not do it yet. But I stored them in the back of a closet, out of my sight. When I finished moving, I would decide if I burned them or simply left them forgotten somewhere. I canceled my phone number. That number I had had for 15 years. The number Jennifer and Christopher had saved but never dialed. I canceled it and got a new one with a prepaid plan that did not require a contract or detailed personal information. I deleted my Facebook account, the only social media I had. I erased years of posts no one had commented on, photos no one had liked, messages I had sent that were never answered. It was liberating to see that account disappear with a simple click. I changed my email, the old one, where I received notifications of my children's birthdays that I never celebrated with them. I closed it. I opened a new one with a generic name no one could associate with me. Weeks passed, and I kept working on my plan with the dedication of someone who had finally found a purpose. One day I received a call on my old phone, just before canceling it. It was Christopher. My heart jumped, but not from hope, but from rage. I answered without saying anything. "Mom," said his voice on the other end. "We need to talk." Silence followed. "Look, I know things got out of hand at Jennifer's party. Maybe we didn't present it the best way." "Maybe? Maybe?" I repeated with a flat voice. Christopher sighed. "The point is the offer still stands. In fact, we have secured a better price on the beach property. Now we would need only $150,000 from your end instead of the $200,000. "How generous," I said without emotion. "Come on, Mom. Do not be like that. It is a good investment. And besides, it would be good for everyone to have a place to gather. You could see the grandkids more." Where had I heard that before? Ah, yes, in the garden of Jennifer's mansion, when they tried to ambush me in front of 50 people. "I am not interested, Christopher, period." "But Mom," he started to say. "Do not call me anymore." I interrupted him. "I do not want to know anything about your beach house, nor your investments, nor your life." There was a surprised silence. "You are being very dramatic, Mom." "You think I am dramatic?" I asked, feeling the cold rage heat up a little. 20 years without a call from you, and I am the dramatic one. 20 years begging for your attention, and I am the dramatic one. "Oh, Mom, you started with that again," he said with that tone of annoyance I knew so well. "Always exaggerating everything. We haven't called you because we are busy. We have lives, responsibilities. We cannot be catering to you all the time." "I did not ask you to cater to me all the time," I replied. "I asked you to call me even once a year. I asked to meet my grandchildren. I asked to be part of your lives in some way. And you consciously decided that I did not matter. And now that you need money, suddenly I do matter. That is not how it is, and you know it," he said. "Look, if you do not want to invest in the house, that is fine. But do not come later wanting to visit or spend time there with the family." "The family," I repeated. "What family, Christopher? You are not my family. Family cares about one another. Family answers the phone. Family does not disappear for 2 decades and then appear asking for money." "You are being ridiculous," he said, raising his voice. "You know what, Mom? Do whatever you want, but do not expect us to keep begging you to be part of our lives." "You never begged me for anything," I replied. "I was the one who begged. But that is over," and I hung up. Immediately after, I turned off the phone, took out the SIM card, and cut it into pieces with scissors. That number ceased to exist in that moment. And with it, the last connection Jennifer and Christopher had to find me. 3 months later, my transformation was complete. The judge had approved my name change. I was no longer Margaret Ross. I was now Selena Owens. A new name for a new life. It sounded strange still when I said it out loud, but it was my name now. My apartment had sold and closed. I no longer lived in the same city. I had moved to that coastal town where no one knew me. where I could walk on the beach every morning without running into anyone from my past. My new condo was small, but sufficient. It had a balcony with an ocean view where I drank my coffee every morning watching the sunrise. It was peace. It was silence. It was freedom. I had transferred all my money to the new accounts under my new name. $395,000 in total, between what I had saved and what I got from the apartment sale. It was more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life if I was careful. Sarah Parker, my attorney, had completed all the legal changes. Jennifer and Christopher had been removed from absolutely everything. My will now left everything to a foundation that helped older women abandoned by their families. It was ironic and appropriate. My life insurance had the same beneficiary. My medical documents no longer listed them as emergency contacts. In case of emergency, the name appearing now was Sarah's, who had accepted to be my legal representative for everything. For 6 months I knew nothing of Jennifer or Christopher. 6 months of absolute silence, which, to be honest, was not very different from the last 20 years. Except that now the silence was my choice, not theirs. I was the one who had disappeared. I was the one who had cut the ties. And it felt good. It felt powerful. I had made friends with some people in my new neighborhood. Betty, a 72-year-old lady who lived in the unit below, came to have coffee with me twice a week. She told me about her children who lived in another city, but called her every Sunday without fail. I smiled and nodded, without telling her my story. To her, I was simply Selena, a widow who had decided to retire near the sea. One afternoon in October, 6 months after Jennifer's party, my new phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but it had the area code of my previous city. I hesitated before answering. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Mrs. Margaret Ross?" asked a male voice I did not recognize. "I do not use that name anymore," I replied. "Who is speaking?" "I am attorney Daniel Rivers. I represent your son, Christopher Ross. I need to locate you urgently." My heart raced, but I kept my voice firm. "How did you get this number? We have been trying to find you for months, ma'am. Your previous number was canceled. Your apartment was sold. You do not appear in any public record. Your son is very worried." "My son hasn't worried about me in 20 years, I replied. "What does he want?" The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. "It is about an important family matter. We need you to return to sign some documents." "I am not going to sign anything," I said. "And I am not going to return." "But how did you know about this number?" The lawyer hesitated. "Your former attorney, Mrs. Parker, gave us this contact." I felt a pang of betrayal, but I understood Sarah had legal obligations. If there was a court order or something similar, she probably had to give information. "What kind of documents?" I finally asked. "That I need to discuss with you in person, ma'am. It is of a delicate nature." "No," I said firmly. "Whatever you have to tell me, you can tell me now over the phone or do not tell me at all." There was a long silence. "Very well," he finally said. "It is about your late husband." "What about him?" I asked, confused. "My husband died 23 years ago." "Yes, ma'am. But recently it was discovered that he had a bank account no one knew about, an account with considerable funds. As his widow, you are entitled to those funds. But we need your signature to process the inheritance." "How much money?" I asked directly. The lawyer hesitated again. "Approximately $150,000 with accrued interest. $150,000, exactly the amount they wanted me to put in for the beach house." How convenient that suddenly this lost account appeared. "Listen, Mr. Rivers," I said with a calm voice. "I am going to be very clear. I have no interest in that money. If it is part of my husband's estate, and my children are his heirs too, they can keep it all. I am not interested." "But, ma'am," he started to protest. "And another thing," I interrupted him. "Do not look for me again. Do not call me again. Do not send lawyers or investigators again. I chose to disappear from their lives just as you made me disappear from yours for 20 years. The difference is that mine is permanent. Mrs. Ross, please." "I am not Margaret Ross anymore," I said. "That name no longer exists legally, and the person I was no longer exists either. Goodbye, Mr. Rivers." And I hung up. I blocked the number immediately. My heart was beating fast, but not from fear or sadness. It was pure adrenaline. They had tried to find me. They had hired lawyers. They had invented a story about a lost bank account, all to locate me. All because they had finally realized they could no longer access me or my money. I poured myself a glass of water and went out to the balcony. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky oranges and pinks. I breathed the salty air and allowed myself to feel the victory. They had spent 6 months looking for me, 6 months trying to track me down, and I had simply disappeared. But I knew this wasn't over. I knew my children. I knew their persistence when they wanted something. They wouldn't give up so easily. A week later, I received a certified letter. It came from a courthouse. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a summons. Christopher was suing me for abandonment of family responsibilities. I read the document with disbelief. It alleged that I, as a mother, had the moral and financial obligation to support my family, that I had made verbal promises to contribute to family investments, that my sudden disappearance had caused emotional damage to my grandchildren who barely knew me. It was absurd. It was ridiculous. But it was also real. I called Sarah immediately. I received the summons. I told her, "Can they really sue me for this?" Sarah sighed. "They can try, but they have no case. You have no legal obligation to give them money. Verbal promises are impossible to prove, and abandonment of family responsibilities generally applies to parents of minors or dependents, not the other way around." "Then why are they doing it?" I asked. "Pressure," Sarah replied. "They want to scare you so you show up, so you negotiate. They want the legal process to wear you down until you give in and give them what they want." "What should I do?" I asked. "Show up to the hearing," she replied. "Unfortunately, you cannot ignore a court summons, but I will be with you, and we are going to make it very clear that they have no right over your money or your life." The hearing was scheduled for a month away, a month in which I would have to return to the city I had left behind, face the children who had abandoned me, and defend my right to disappear from their lives just as they disappeared from mine. I wasn't scared. I was angry. A cold and just anger that gave me strength. I spent that month preparing mentally. I practiced what I would say. I organized all the documents that proved my story. The receipts for the gifts I sent for years. The screenshots of unanswered messages. The logs of calls that were never returned. Everything. If they wanted to play dirty, I would show them exactly how dirty their conduct had been for 2 decades. The day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with Sarah by my side. I wore a simple gray suit, and my hair pulled back. I looked presentable, but not intimidated. When I entered the courtroom, I saw Christopher sitting with his lawyer. Jennifer was there too, dressed elegantly as always. Robert was sitting behind them. They looked at me when I entered, and I saw something in their eyes that satisfied me deeply. Surprise. They didn't expect me to show up with such confidence. The judge entered, and we all stood up. He was a man in his 60s with a serious expression. He sat down and reviewed the documents in front of him with a furrowed brow. "All right," he began, looking over his glasses. "We are here for a lawsuit filed by Mr. Christopher Ross against his mother, Mrs. Margaret Ross, for abandonment of family responsibilities and breach of verbal promises. Before beginning, I need to clarify something." The judge looked directly at me. "Ma'am, I have documents here indicating your legal name was changed 6 months ago. You are no longer Margaret Ross, but Selena Owens. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied with a clear voice. "That is correct." I saw Christopher and Jennifer exchange looks of confusion and rage. The judge nodded. "We will proceed then, using your current legal name. Mr. Rivers, proceed with your argument." Christopher's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client and his sister have suffered emotional and financial abandonment by their mother." "Mrs." he started to say Ross, but corrected himself. "Mrs. Owens disappeared without notice 6 months ago, cutting all contact with her family. This has caused considerable emotional damage, especially to the minor grandchildren who miss their grandmother." I had to bite my lip not to let out a bitter laugh. "The grandchildren I never knew missed me," the lawyer continued. "Furthermore, the lady had verbally promised to contribute financially to a family project, a real estate investment that my clients had planned, counting on her participation. When she disappeared, My clients lost the opportunity to close that investment, causing them financial losses. Sarah stood up. Objection, Your Honor. There is no written proof of said verbal promises. And as for the alleged emotional abandonment, we have extensive evidence that it was exactly the opposite. The judge raised his hand. We will get to that. Mr. Rivers, do you have any tangible proof of these verbal promises? The lawyer hesitated. We have testimonies from those present at the birthday party where the topic was discussed. Testimonies from people who were at that public ambush, I thought. The judge seemed skeptical. Continue. I would like to call Mrs. Jennifer Stone to testify. Jennifer stood up and walked to the stand. She looked perfect as always, every hair in place, her clothes expensive and elegant. She swore to tell the truth and sat down. Mrs. Stone, began her lawyer. Can you describe the relationship you have had with your mother over the years? Jennifer took a deep breath and put on her victim face. My mother has always been a very difficult person, she began. After my father died, she became demanding, needy for constant attention. I tried to maintain contact, but it was exhausting. Every conversation ended with her complaining that we didn't visit her enough, that we didn't call her enough. It was a very heavy emotional burden. I clenched my fists under the table, but kept my face neutral. And regarding the real estate investment, continued the lawyer. Yes, replied Jennifer. We thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to finally have a place to gather as a family. A place where Mom could spend time with her grandchildren. We explained everything to her at my birthday party. She seemed interested, said she would think about it, but then she disappeared without giving explanations. She sold her house, changed her name, left without telling us where. She left us worried, not knowing if she was alive or dead. Her eyes filled with perfectly timed tears. My grandchildren ask about their grandmother all the time. I do not know what to tell them. Sarah stood up for cross-examination. Mrs. Stone, when was the last time you called your mother before the birthday party? Jennifer blinked. I do not remember exactly. Sarah pulled out a document. I have here Mrs. Owen's phone records for the last 5 years. There is not a single incoming call from your number or your brother's. Not one. In 5 years. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Well, I was very busy. So busy you couldn't make a phone call in 5 years? Asked Sarah. And what about the previous 20 years? We have testimonies from neighbors, acquaintances, distant relatives, confirming that you and your brother cut contact with your mother for over 2 decades. That is not true, protested Jennifer. We sent messages. We had communication. Sarah pulled out more papers. Here I have screenshots of all the messages your mother sent you for years. Hundreds of messages. Birthday wishes, Christmas messages, photos, questions about how you were. And do you know how many of those messages were answered, Mrs. Stone? Not a single one. Jennifer went pale. Well, sometimes I didn't see the messages. For years? Insisted Sarah. And the gifts? Your mother has receipts for dozens of gifts sent to your address. Expensive gifts bought with her pension money. A cashmere shawl for $250, a silver cutlery set for $600, a bicycle for your son for $500. Did you ever thank her for those gifts? Did you ever let her know you had received them? Jennifer did not answer. And the grandchildren? Continued Sarah, relentless. Your mother went to your house when your first child was born. You left her standing at the door for less than 5 minutes. You didn't let her in. You didn't let her hold the baby. Is that how you treat a grandmother who is supposedly so important to your children? That was, Jennifer searched for words. It was a bad time. The baby was sleeping. 3 months after birth was still a bad time? Asked Sarah. 6 months later. A year later. At what moment exactly did you plan to allow your mother to meet your children? She is badgering the witness. The judge shook his head. Overruled. I want to hear the answer. Jennifer had real tears now, not the acted ones from before. I do not know. Things were complicated. Complicated? Repeated Sarah. Or you simply didn't care? You didn't care for 20 years until you needed your mother's money for your beach house. Then, yes, you remembered you had a mother. Then, yes, you invited her to a party. Not to celebrate, but to pressure her publicly to give you $150,000. It is not like that, protested Jennifer weakly. Sarah turned to the judge. Your Honor, this is not a case of maternal abandonment. It is a case of adult children who abandoned their mother for 2 decades and are now upset because she finally took control of her own life and financial resources. They have no legal right to my client's money. They have no moral right either, considering how they treated her. Jennifer stepped down from the stand, visibly affected. Christopher was called to testify next. His version was similar to his sister's. He spoke of how I was difficult, demanding, how they had tried to maintain contact, but I always wanted more. Sarah destroyed him just like Jennifer, with evidence after evidence of their years of silence and negligence. Finally, I was called to testify. I walked to the stand with my head held high. I swore to tell the truth, although the truth was already more than clear in the documents Sarah had presented. Mrs. Owens, began Sarah, can you explain to the judge why you decided to change your name and move? I looked directly at the judge. For 20 years, I tried to maintain a relationship with my children. I called them, and they didn't answer. I sent them messages, and they didn't reply. I sent them gifts, and never knew if they received them. I went to their houses, and they closed the door in my face. My grandchildren are 8, 6, and 4 years old. I have never held them. I have never spent a birthday with them. I barely know their names. My voice cracked slightly, but I continued. Not because I didn't want to, but because my children consciously excluded me from their lives. For 20 years I begged for their love, for their attention, for a small space in their perfect lives. And for 20 years they ignored me completely. Until they needed money, then yes, they invited me to a party. Not to reconnect, but to pressure me in front of 50 strangers to give them my life savings. And when did you realize this? Asked Sarah, even though she knew the answer. The moment they asked me to sign documents they already had prepared, I replied. The moment my son Christopher told me exactly how much money I had, information he could only have obtained by investigating me behind my back. That is when I understood that for them, I was never their mother. I was just a bank account they finally decided to access. I looked at Christopher and Jennifer directly, and I decided that if for them I didn't exist, then I would really cease to exist. Legally, physically, completely. The judge listened intently. Mrs. Owens, he asked directly, what do you want from this situation? I want them to leave me alone, Your Honor, I replied. I want them to respect my decision to live my life without them, the same way they lived their lives without me for 20 years. I owe them nothing. I do not owe them money. I do not owe them explanations. I do not owe them my presence. They made their decision 20 years ago. I made mine 6 months ago, and my decision is final. The judge nodded and asked us to leave while he deliberated. We waited outside the courtroom for 30 minutes that felt eternal. Christopher and Jennifer were on the other side of the hallway, talking in low voices with their lawyer. They didn't look at me once. Finally, they called us back. The judge had the documents organized in front of him, and his expression was serious but clear. I have reviewed all the evidence presented, he began. And I must say this is one of the clearest cases I have seen in a long time. He took off his glasses and looked directly at Christopher and Jennifer. Mr. Ross, Mrs. Stone, you come before this court alleging abandonment by your mother. However, the evidence presented demonstrates exactly the opposite. For more than 20 years, your mother attempted to maintain contact with you in every possible way. Unanswered phone calls, ignored messages, gifts sent without acknowledgement, visits rejected at your front doors. I saw Christopher clench his jaw. Jennifer looked down. The judge continued, there is no law compelling a mother of independent adult children to maintain contact with them if she does not wish to. Much less is there any law compelling her to contribute financially to her children's investment projects. The alleged verbal promises you claim are impossible to verify and, frankly, considering the context presented, seem more like a convenient fabrication than a reality. Christopher's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge raised his hand. I haven't finished. What I find particularly troubling in this case is the clear pattern of emotional neglect on the part of the plaintiffs toward their mother followed by a sudden interest when they discovered she had considerable financial resources. That is not filial love. That is opportunism. Therefore, proceeded the judge, this court dismisses the lawsuit in its entirety. Mrs. Selina Owens, formerly known as Margaret Ross, has no legal, moral, or ethical obligation toward her adult children. Furthermore, I order the plaintiffs to cease all attempts to contact, locate, or harass Mrs. Owens. Any violation of this order will result in harassment charges. Case closed. The bang of his gavel resonated in the room like a gunshot. I felt something release inside my chest. It was official. It was legal. It was definitive. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. Christopher stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed. "She is our mother. She has obligations to us." The judge looked at him sternly. "Mr. Ross, I suggest you sit down and accept the verdict. Otherwise, I will find you in contempt. And allow me to add something personal, although it is not part of the official verdict. I am a father of 3 children and grandfather of 5 grandchildren. I cannot imagine spending 20 days without talking to them, much less 20 years. What you did to your mother is unforgivable. That you now come crying because she finally said enough is pathetic. Get out of my court." Christopher stood paralyzed. Jennifer had started to cry, real tears this time, tears of rage and humiliation. Robert took her by the arm, trying to lead her out of the room. But Jennifer pulled away and walked toward where I was. "Mom," she began with a broken voice, "please, do not do this. We can fix things." I looked her in the eyes, those eyes that looked so much like mine, but looked at me as if I were a stranger. "There is nothing to fix, Jennifer," I said with a calm voice. "You and your brother made your decision many years ago. You chose your lives without me, and I respected them. Now I have chosen my life without you, and I need you to respect my decision. But we are your family. I am me. Family does not disappear for 20 years, I replied. Family does not close doors in your face. Family does not ignore calls and messages for 2 decades. Family does not appear only when they need money. You were not my family for 20 years. I am not going to pretend you are now." I turned to leave, but Christopher blocked my path. "You are going to regret this," he said with a low and threatening voice. "When you are old and sick and need help, we won't be there." I looked directly at him, and for the first time in years, I smiled. A sad but genuine smile. "Christopher, you have never been there, not when I was younger and needed you. Not when I was alone and begged for your company. Why would I think you would be there in the future? I already made arrangements for my old age. I have excellent health insurance. I have enough savings to hire care if I need it. And most importantly, I have my dignity intact, something you lost a long time ago." I stepped aside and walked past him. Sarah followed me. We left the courthouse into the daylight. The sun was shining bright, and I felt its warmth on my face like a blessing. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked me. "I am perfect," I replied, and I meant it. For the first time in 20 years, I was perfect. I returned to my apartment by the sea that same afternoon. I didn't stay even one more day in that city that was no longer my home. During the bus ride, I looked out the window thinking about everything that had happened, about the woman I was 6 months ago, begging for crumbs of love, about the woman I was now, free and at peace. I arrived when the sun was setting. I went up to my condo, dropped my things, and went straight out to the balcony. The ocean stretched out in front of me, infinite and beautiful. I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did, and toasted alone. To endings, I said aloud, and to new beginnings. The following days were quiet. I resumed my routine of walking on the beach every morning. Betty came over for coffee, and I told her, for the first time, part of my story. She listened without judging, and when I finished, she just took my hand and said, "You did the right thing, honey. Sometimes we have to let go of even our own blood to be able to live." Weeks passed. Then months. I heard nothing more from Jennifer or Christopher. I assumed they had finally understood my decision was irreversible. One afternoon, 4 months after the trial, I received a package. It had no return address, but the postmark was from my old city. I opened it with curiosity and caution. Inside was a small box and a letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Jennifer. My hands trembled as I opened the letter. "Mom," it began. "I knew you probably wouldn't read this, but I need to try. I have spent these months thinking a lot, in therapy, talking to my husband, reflecting on everything. And you are right. About everything. I was a terrible daughter. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I ignored you for years. And when I finally sought you out, it was for the wrong reasons. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not expect you to want to see me ever again. I just want you to know I am sorry. I truly am sorry. I am sorry for every call I didn't answer. I am sorry for every birthday I forgot. I am sorry for every door I closed in your face. I am sorry for depriving my children of knowing their grandmother. I am sorry for being so selfish, so blind, so cruel." The letter continued for 2 more pages. She talked about how she had started seeing a therapist who helped her understand she had repeated patterns of her own fear of abandonment by closing herself off emotionally. She talked about how Christopher was still in denial, but she couldn't go on like that. She talked about her children, how she had started telling them about me, about the grandmother they didn't know because of her. "The box contains something I found in the attic," the letter said. "Something you kept from me when I was a child. I thought you should have it back. I ask nothing of you, just that you know that I know who failed here. And it wasn't you. With love and regret, Jennifer." I opened the box with tears in my eyes. Inside was an old necklace, the kind you buy at trinket shops, but I recognized it immediately. It was the first gift Jennifer had given me when she was 7 years old. She had bought it with her own savings, $5 she had scraped together over months. She had given it to me on Mother's Day with a handmade card that said, "To the best mom in the world." I had kept that necklace for years like a treasure. She must have found it when they cleared out my old house after selling it. I held the necklace in my hands and cried. They weren't tears of joy or reconciliation. They were tears of grief for what could have been and never was, for the relationship we should have had and was lost, for the years we would never get back. I put the letter and the necklace in a box at the back of my closet. I did not reply. I did not call. I did not look for Jennifer, because even though I appreciated her apology, even though I recognized her apparent sincerity, I also knew that some things are broken in ways that cannot be repaired. And I was at peace with that. I had spent 20 years trying to force a relationship my children didn't want. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life doing the same, not even if now it was one of them seeking to reconnect. My life now was mine. My time was mine. My peace was mine. And I wasn't willing to risk any of that, not even for the possibility of recovering a daughter I had lost a long time ago. 6 months after receiving that letter, on a particularly beautiful morning, I was drinking coffee on my balcony when Betty came up with a cake. "It is your birthday," she announced with a smile. 70 years deserves to be celebrated. I had completely forgotten my birthday. I didn't even keep track of those things anymore. But Betty had remembered, because I had mentioned it months ago in casual conversation. We cut the cake and ate it watching the sunrise. She told me stories of her 72 years, of her regrets and her joys, and I shared my own reflections. "I reached this age finally feeling free," I told her. "Free of expectations that were never met. Free of a family that viewed me as a burden. Free of begging for love that wasn't reciprocal. And you know what, Betty? It feels glorious." She raised her coffee mug in a toast. "To freedom," she said. "To dignity. To women who finally said enough." We toasted, and the sun finished rising over the ocean. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. I hadn't lost my children. My children had lost me. And it was their loss, not mine. Because I had spent 70 years learning to love unconditionally, to give without expecting anything in return, to be strong even when everything crumbled. I had raised 2 children alone. I had worked to exhaustion. I had sacrificed everything for them. And when I finally decided to stop sacrificing myself, when I finally chose my own peace over their comfort, I became the villain of their story. But I didn't mind being the villain if it meant finally being free. Today, 3 years after that birthday party that changed everything, I continue living in my condo by the sea. I am 72 years old. My hair is completely white, and I no longer bother dyeing it. I have deep wrinkles that tell the story of a full life, with its pains and its victories. I walk on the beach every morning without fail. I have made friends here, women my age who understand what it is to reinvent oneself in the last stage of life. We go to yoga classes together. We organize dinners. We celebrate our birthdays. We are the family we chose, not the one we were given. Sometimes I think of Jennifer and Christopher. I wonder how they are, if they are carrying on with their perfect lives, if they bought their beach house with someone else's money. But those thoughts are less and less frequent and less painful. I do not hate them. Maybe I should, but I don't. I simply release them. I let them go like you let go of anything that hurts you. And in that letting go, I found something I never expected to find. I found myself. Selena Owens, a 72-year-old woman who lives alone but is not alone, who has little money but enough, who has no family but has community, who lost her children but gained her freedom. My story does not have a happy ending in the traditional sense. There is no reconciliation. There is no final hug. There is no mutual forgiveness and fresh start. But it has something better. It has peace. It has dignity. It has a woman who finally understood that her worth does not depend on others recognizing it. And that, I discovered, is more than enough. I finish my coffee while the sun rises completely on the horizon. Another day. Another opportunity to live on my own terms. I smile and go inside to get ready for my morning walk. Life goes on. My life goes on. And for the first time in decades, that fills me with joy instead of sadness. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when my world fell apart. I heard the voice of my daughter-in-law, Victoria, through the phone. "We're taking her to the nursing home tomorrow. It's all arranged." My blood ran cold. I grabbed only my purse and escaped through the back door. The next day, they were desperately looking for me, but it was already too late for regrets. My name is Margaret. I am 70 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have lived in the house of my son Daniel and his wife Victoria. I thought it was my home. I thought they were my family. How wrong I was. It all started when I was widowed. Daniel showed up at my door with tears in his eyes, telling me he couldn't leave me alone, that he was my only family, that he needed me close. His words moved me so much that I sold my condo and moved in with them. At first, everything seemed perfect. Daniel treated me with affection. Victoria smiled when she saw me, and I felt useful helping with the housework and taking care of them. But slowly, very slowly, the smiles began to fade. The sweet words became sharp. The hugs turned into empty gestures. And I, like a fool, kept believing it was just a rough patch, that things would get better. Victoria was the first to show her true colors. It started with seemingly innocent comments. "Margaret, don't you think you're eating a bit too much? Or, maybe you should stay in your room when we have guests. The house looks tidier that way." Daniel never contradicted her. Even worse, he started to back her up. "Mom, Victoria is right. It's better if you get more rest." Rest. That was their favorite word when they wanted me to disappear. The months passed, and the humiliations intensified. Victoria stopped cooking for me. "If you want something special to eat, you can make it yourself," she would tell me with that fake smile she had perfected. Daniel would pretend not to notice when he came home from work and found my empty plate on the table while they finished their dinner. "Did you eat, Mom?" he would ask distractedly, not really waiting for an answer. One night, while I was washing the dishes after they had gone to their room, I heard their voices through the wall. "You can't keep this up forever," Victoria was saying. "She's too much of a burden." "I know," Daniel replied, "but she's my mother." "Exactly, she's your mother, not mine, and I didn't marry you to become a full-time nurse for the elderly." My hands trembled as I held the plate. A nurse for the elderly? That's what she thought of me. Not a mother-in-law, not a grandmother to her future children, but a burden. The following weeks were hell. Victoria began to treat me as if I were invisible. She would walk past me without even a glance. When I spoke to her, she would respond with one-word answers or simply ignore me. Daniel was no better. He would come home from work, kiss Victoria, and greet me with a nod as if I were a stranger in his own house. But what hurt the most was the way they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear them. "She's getting slower," Victoria would say. "Yesterday it took her an hour to do something that would normally take 20 minutes. Maybe we should look into some options," Daniel would reply with a hesitant voice. Options. That word haunted me during sleepless nights. What kind of options? I didn't dare to ask, but something inside me already knew the answer. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to find out, was that I had my own secrets. Secrets I kept like cards up my sleeve for the day I would need them. During my 60 years of marriage, my late husband and I had been very careful with our money. We had properties, investments, savings accounts that had grown silently over the years. When I sold my condo to move in with Daniel, I didn't spend that money. I invested it, and it had grown. A lot. Furthermore, there was something else they were completely unaware of. Something that could change everything if I ever decided to reveal it. But that night, that damned August night, while I was pretending to sleep in my small room at the end of the hall, I heard footsteps in the kitchen. It was Victoria, talking on the phone in a low voice. I got up silently and walked to my bedroom door. Her words reached my ears like daggers. "Yes, I've already spoken with the director. She can take her in tomorrow." Daniel agrees. "We just need her to sign the papers." A pause. My heart was beating so loudly I was afraid she could hear it. "No, she doesn't know anything. Tomorrow we'll tell her it's just a visit, to see the place. Once she's there, it will be easier to convince her to stay." Another, longer pause. "Do I feel bad? Please. We've been putting up with her for 5 years. It's time for her to live her own life in the place where she belongs." My knees almost buckled. The nursing home. They were going to take me to a nursing home, without consulting me, without giving me a choice, as if I were a piece of old furniture they wanted to get rid of. In that moment, I knew I had to act. I couldn't just stay there waiting for morning to come and for them to drag me away like an animal to the slaughter. Very slowly, I returned to my room and grabbed my purse. Inside were my most important documents, some cash, and my phone. It was all I needed for now. I waited until I heard Victoria go upstairs and close her bedroom door. Then, like a thief in my own house, I tiptoed to the back door. The night air was cool against my skin. For the first time in years, I took a deep breath and felt something akin to freedom. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was never going to be anyone's victim again. I walked through the dark streets for an hour before catching a cab. I gave the driver the address of the most elegant hotel in the city. If they were going to treat me like a homeless person, it was time to remind them who I really was. The receptionist looked at me strangely when I arrived at 3 a.m. with only a purse, but my credit card spoke for itself. The presidential suite, for 2 nights to start. I sat on that king-sized bed, in that room that cost more per night than Daniel earned in a week, and for the first time in years, I truly smiled. At 6 a.m, my phone started ringing. "Daniel." I let it ring. He called again, and again, and again. Then the text started coming. "Mom, where are you? We're worried. Please answer." Worried? What a convenient word. By 8, Victoria had also started calling. Her voice on the voicemail sounded hysterical. "Margaret, please come back. We don't know what happened. Daniel is desperate." Desperate? Probably because they realized their nursing home plan had been ruined. I ordered room service, eggs Benedict, smoked salmon, fresh fruit, Colombian coffee. As I ate on the terrace of my suite overlooking the city, I imagined Daniel and Victoria running around the house, searching for me in every corner, calling hospitals, maybe even the police. Let them worry. Let them feel even a fraction of the anguish I had felt for years. After breakfast, I made some important calls. The first was to my bank. I wanted to know exactly how much money I had available. The figure surprised even me. The investments had performed better than I had expected. The second call was more delicate. I dialed the number of Benjamin Carter, the best family law attorney in the city. I knew him because he had handled my husband's will years ago. "Mrs. Margaret?" His voice sounded surprised. "How are you?" "I need to see you urgently, Benjamin. I have a complicated family situation." "Of course. Can you come in this afternoon?" "I'll be there." The third call was the most important of all. I dialed a number I had saved for more than 5 years, since I moved in with Daniel. It was Lauren, my old friend and real estate agent. "Margaret, what a surprise to hear from you. How are you, dear?" "Lauren, I need you to do a very special favor for me. Do you remember that property downtown you saw years ago? The one you said would be perfect for me if I ever decided to be independent again? While we talked, my phone kept vibrating with missed calls. Daniel had called 14 times, Victoria 8. They had even managed to find my late husband's number, which I still kept as an emergency contact, and had called there. How desperate it must be to not be able to control someone when you're used to manipulating them. At 2 in the afternoon, I went down to the hotel lobby dressed in my best pearl gray suit and my most elegant leather shoes. I had made an appointment at the hotel's beauty salon. Manicure, pedicure, cut and style. If I was going to start a war, I would do it looking impeccable. The stylist, a young woman named Katie, looked at me curiously. "Special occasion, ma'am?" "You could say that," I replied. "It's the first day of the rest of my life." While Katie worked on my hair, I reflected on the last 5 years. How had I allowed them to treat me like that? When had I stopped valuing myself? The answer was painful but clear. From the moment I thought being a burden was better than being alone. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had money, I had resources, and most importantly, I had the truth on my side. At 4 in the afternoon, I arrived at Benjamin's office. It was on the 25th floor of a skyscraper in the financial district. The windows overlooked the entire city, and from there I could see the neighborhood where Daniel lived. "Margaret, you look splendid," Benjamin said as he poured me a coffee. "But something tells me this isn't a social visit." I told him everything, the conversation I had overheard, the nursing home plan, my nighttime escape. Benjamin took notes while I spoke, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "This is very serious, Margaret. What they plan to do could constitute elder abuse, especially if they intended to do it without your consent. What are my options?" "Many. But first, I need you to tell me something. Do they know about your real financial situation?" "Number, they have no idea. Daniel thinks I'm a poor widow living off his charity." Benjamin smiled for the first time in the meeting. "Then we have a considerable advantage." He explained the legal options: restraining orders, lawsuits for emotional abuse, even criminal charges if we could prove they had planned to commit me against my will. "But I have a different proposal," he continued. "What if we teach them a lesson they will never forget?" His eyes sparkled with a glint that I immediately liked. "I'm all ears, Benjamin. We're going to show them exactly what the woman they thought they could discard is worth. But we will do it in a way that the blow is public, definitive, and completely legal." I left that office with a plan that would take a few weeks to execute, but would be worth every minute of the wait. Back at the hotel, I finally decided to answer one of Daniel's calls. "Mom, thank God. Where are you? We've been looking for you everywhere. Victoria is crying. We thought something terrible had happened to you." His voice sounded genuinely concerned. He almost convinced me. Almost. "I'm fine, Daniel. I just needed to go for a walk and clear my head." "A walk? It's been more than 12 hours. Where are you exactly?" "In a safe place. Don't worry about me." "Mom, please, come home. We can talk about whatever is bothering you." Talk? As if it were that simple. "You know what, Daniel? You're right. We do need to talk. But not on the phone, in person, and when I'm ready." "When will that be?" "Soon. Very soon." I hung up before he could reply. That night, as I had lobster for dinner in my suite overlooking the city lights, I toasted to myself, to the woman I had been, to the woman I was reclaiming, and to the woman I was becoming. Daniel and Victoria had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the wrong woman. The following days were a mix of strategic preparation and personal rediscovery. Every morning I would wake up in that luxury suite, order my breakfast to the room, and work on my battle plan. While Daniel and Victoria kept calling, desperately, their messages had evolved from concern to pleading, and then to something that sounded dangerously close to veiled threats. "Mom, this isn't funny anymore," Daniel said in his last message. "Victoria is sick with nerves. You need to come back right now, or we will have to take more drastic measures." More drastic measures? Like taking me to the nursing home by force? How predictable they were. But there was something they didn't know, something I had discovered during my conversations with Benjamin. It turns out that the house where they had lived all these years, the house Daniel considered his, actually had a more complicated history. When my husband died, he left that property in a trust under my name. Daniel could live there as long as I was alive and consented, but technically, legally, the house was mine. He never bothered to read the full will documents. Why would he? After all, I was just his poor widowed mother who depended on his generosity. On the 4th day of my disappearance, I decided it was time to begin the next phase. Lauren had found the perfect apartment, a penthouse in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, fully furnished, with 24-hour concierge service. "Margaret, this place is a dream," she told me as we toured the apartment. 2 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a terrace with a hot tub, and the most spectacular view in the entire city. "When can I move in?" "Whenever you want. The owner is desperate to rent it to someone reliable." I signed the lease that same afternoon, 2 years, paid in advance, in cash. After leaving the real estate office, I took a taxi to the most elegant shopping mall in the city. It was time to renew my wardrobe. For years, I had dressed like the poor widow they thought I was. Worn-out clothes, dull colors, comfortable but styleless shoes. Today, that ended. At the most exclusive boutique, a saleswoman named Katie attended to me with that mix of professional courtesy and slight disdain reserved for customers who didn't look like they could afford the merchandise. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "I need a completely new wardrobe, business suits, cocktail dresses, shoes, accessories, everything." Her expression changed slightly when I pulled out my black card. 2 hours later, I walked out of there with 8 bags full of clothes that cost more than Daniel earned in 3 months. Dresses in shades of emerald, cherry red, gold, deep violet. I would never wear sad colors again. That night, as I was packing my new acquisitions, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Mrs. Margaret? This is Inspector Marcus Riley from the city police. Your son Daniel filed a missing person report. Could you confirm that you are okay?" Interesting. They had escalated the drama to involve the police. "Inspector, I am perfectly fine. I am in full command of my mental faculties, and I decided to take a vacation. There is no disappearance to investigate." "Could you tell me where you are exactly? Your son is very worried." "I am in the city, in a safe place. Inspector, I want it on the record that I left that house of my own free will, and that I do not wish to be contacted until I am ready." "Understood, ma'am. Is there anything else you need?" "Yes. If my son or his wife file any more false reports about me, I want them to know that I might consider it harassment." The silence on the other end of the line was eloquent. The next day, I moved into the penthouse. The movers arrived at the hotel at 8 in the morning to transport my few belongings. It was strange how little I needed when it was really about starting over. My new home was everything Lauren had promised, and more. From the terrace, I could see the entire city spread out at my feet. I poured myself a glass of red wine and toasted to my new independence. But the real satisfaction came that afternoon, when I finally decided to answer one of Daniel's calls. "Mom, thank God. The police told us you're okay, but we need to see you." "Where are you exactly?" "I'm at my new home, Daniel." "Your new home? What are you talking about?" "I moved. I got my own apartment." A long silence. "With what money?" "Mom, you don't have the resources to live alone. You need to come home before you do something you'll regret." "My home? Interesting that you use that word. What do you mean?" "Nothing, son. Just that it's funny how sometimes words reveal more than we intend." "Mom, you're talking strangely. Victoria says maybe you need medical help. We could take you to a doctor for a checkup." There it was, the real Victoria surfacing. "Victoria says that. How thoughtful of her to be concerned about my mental health. She just wants what's best for you. We all want what's best for you." "Like taking me to a nursing home?" The silence that followed was deafening. "What are you talking about?" "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, Daniel." "Mom, we never." "Never what? Never planned to commit me without my consent? Never discussed how convenient it would be to get rid of the burden I represent?" "I don't know where you heard that, but—" "I heard it from your wife's lips, Daniel. At 2 o'clock in the morning, on the phone, arranging my fate as if I were a piece of old furniture to be discarded." Another long, tense silence. "Mom, If you overheard something out of context? Out of context? We're taking her to the nursing home tomorrow. It's all arranged. What context could possibly make those words mean something different? We were just exploring options. Without consulting me. We thought it would be for the best. You thought it would be more convenient. For you, it's not like that. Then explain it to me, Daniel. Explain how planning to commit your mother without her knowledge is an act of love. He couldn't, because there was no explanation that could justify the unjustifiable. I want to see you, he finally said. We need to talk in person. I agree, but it will be when I decide. Where I decide. And on my terms. When? Soon, son. Very soon. And when we do see each other, you're going to discover a few things about your poor, widowed mother that are going to surprise you very much. I hung up before he could respond. That night, as I had dinner on my terrace under the stars, I called Benjamin. How is our project coming along? Better than expected, Margaret. I have some very interesting information about Daniel and Victoria's finances. Apparently, they've been living beyond their means for years. How far beyond? Credit card debt, personal loans, a late mortgage. They've been using your presence in the house to justify expenses they can't afford. Interesting. There's more. Apparently, Victoria has been telling her friends that you have senile dementia, and that's why you need special care. She's been building a narrative to justify the nursing home. My blood boiled. Do you have proof of that? I'm gathering it. Margaret, when we're done with this, they are going to regret ever messing with you. I hung up with a smile on my lips. Daniel and Victoria had no idea what was coming for them. A week after moving into the penthouse, I had established my new routine. Breakfast on the terrace, a workout in the building's gym, afternoons working with Benjamin on our master plan. For the first time in years, I felt alive, powerful, in control of my destiny. Daniel had stopped calling after our last conversation. Victoria, on the other hand, had intensified her attempts. Her voicemails revealed a growing desperation. Margaret, please, come back. Daniel is a mess. He's barely eating, barely sleeping. This is destroying us as a family. As a family. What irony. Margaret, I know you're angry, but running away doesn't solve anything. We're adults. We can talk like civilized people. Civilized people, like when they were planning to commit me without my consent. But the message that caught my attention the most arrived on a Thursday night. Margaret, I need to be honest with you. Daniel is considering reporting you as mentally incompetent. He says your behavior proves you can't make rational decisions. Please, come back before this gets out of control. There was the real Victoria, the veiled threat wrapped in false concern. I forwarded the message to Benjamin immediately. Perfect, he said when I called him. This is exactly what we needed. They're digging their own grave. How so? If Daniel tries to have you declared mentally incompetent, we would have grounds for a lawsuit for defamation and elder abuse. But more importantly, it would be the perfect time to reveal your true financial situation. Do you have everything ready for phase 2? Everything is prepared. Are you sure you want to do this in public? Absolutely. I want it to be as humiliating for them as it was for me to hear their plans that night. The plan was simple, yet devastating. Lauren had organized a luxury property exhibition at the most exclusive hotel in the city. Daniel and Victoria had been specifically invited with the excuse that there was an investment opportunity that might interest them. What they didn't know was that I would be the event's keynote speaker. The day arrived faster than expected. I dressed in my new emerald-colored suit, high heels, and jewelry I had bought especially for the occasion. In the mirror, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Elegant, powerful, intimidating. I arrived at the hotel an hour before the guests. The ballroom was perfectly prepared. Tables with property information, canapes, champagne, and a giant screen where the presentations would be projected. Lauren was checking the final details when Benjamin arrived with a portfolio full of documents. Ready for the show? He asked me. More than ready. At 7, the guests began to arrive. Business people, investors, wealthy individuals who were genuinely interested in the properties. And then, at 7:30, I saw them walk in. Daniel was wearing his only good suit, the one he wore for weddings and funerals. Victoria had tried to look elegant in a red dress she had probably bought on sale. They looked completely out of place among the city's financial elite. I watched them from the other side of the ballroom as they looked for whoever had invited them. Their faces showed a mix of nervousness and excitement. They probably thought someone had recognized their investment potential. Lauren went up to the small stage to give the welcome speech. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our exclusive exhibition of premium properties. Tonight, we have the honor of presenting a carefully chosen selection of the best real estate investments in the city. Daniel and Victoria were smiling nervously, trying to blend in with the other guests. But before we begin with the properties, Lauren continued, I want to introduce you to an extraordinary woman, a visionary investor who has recently decided to significantly expand her real estate portfolio. Please, let's welcome Mrs. Margaret Vance. The audience's applause accompanied me as I walked onto the stage. From my elevated position, I could perfectly see Daniel and Victoria's faces. First, confusion. What was their poor, widowed mother doing at a luxury investment event? Then, recognition. It was really me, but transformed, elegant, speaking with confidence in front of an elite audience. Finally, horror as they began to understand the implications of what they were seeing. Good evening, I began, my voice clear and firm. Over the last 5 years, I have learned a lot about the true value of things. Above all, I have learned that sometimes the people closest to us can be the ones who know us the least. I looked directly at where Daniel and Victoria were standing. Their faces had lost all color. I have decided to share my story with you because I believe it perfectly illustrates why it is so important to maintain our financial independence, regardless of our age. The audience listened attentively. Some had already noticed where I was directing my gaze. 5 years ago, I decided to move in with my son and his wife. I sold my property and thought it would be wonderful to live as a family. What I did not expect was to discover that my presence had become a burden to them. A murmur went through the ballroom. This was not the typical investment presentation they were expecting. 2 weeks ago, I happened to overhear a phone conversation. My daughter-in-law was arranging for me to be committed to a nursing home without my knowledge or consent. We're taking her to the nursing home tomorrow. It's all arranged. Those were her exact words. The murmur intensified. Some guests began to look around, trying to identify the protagonists of the story. Daniel tried to move toward the exit, but Victoria stopped him. She probably thought that running away would confirm their guilt. That night, I made a decision. Instead of becoming a victim of their plan, I decided to remind them of something they had completely forgotten. I paused dramatically. That the woman they planned to discard as a nuisance had her own resources. Considerable resources. Benjamin appeared beside the stage with the portfolio of documents. Tonight, I have purchased 3 properties from this exhibition, I continued. A penthouse in the financial district, a country house in the mountains, and a commercial building downtown. Total investment, $2 million. In cash. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Daniel looked as if he was about to faint. Victoria's mouth was wide open. I want this to serve as a lesson for everyone present, I continued. Never underestimate older people. And never, ever, assume you know someone's true situation. I came down from the stage to thunderous applause. The audience was fascinated by the drama they had just witnessed. I walked directly toward Daniel and Victoria. Other guests had already realized who they were and were looking at them with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "Hello, son," I said in a calm voice. "Surprised to see me?" Daniel looked at me as if he had seen a ghost. His face had gone from white to red and then to a sickly green. Victoria, on the other hand, looked like a marble statue, completely paralyzed. "Mom," Daniel whispered, What is all this?" "This, my son, is reality. The reality that you two never bothered to get to know." The other guests began to gather discreetly, pretending to look at property brochures while listening to our conversation. The drama was too juicy to ignore. "Mrs. Margaret," Lauren intervened with a malicious smile, "are these the relatives you told me about? The ones who thought you needed a special care?" Victoria finally found her voice. "Margaret, I don't understand anything. Since when do you have so much money?" "Since always, my dear Victoria. It's just that you assumed I was a poor, helpless widow." You never asked. You were never interested in really knowing my situation. Daniel tried to approach. Mom, if you had resources, why didn't you tell us? We could have. We could have what, Daniel? Treated me with respect, consulted me before planning my life? Or you simply would have found more creative ways to take advantage. An older man who had been listening came over. Excuse me, ma'am, but is it true that they planned to commit you without your consent? Completely true, I replied without taking my eyes off Daniel. My daughter-in-law arranged everything over the phone. It's all arranged, were her words. The man shook his head in disgust. That's elder abuse. They should be in jail. Victoria turned as red as a tomato. That's not true. We only wanted what was best for her. We thought she needed more care. Care? My voice rose slightly. Like ignoring me during dinners? Like making me feel invisible in my own house? Like arguing about how annoying my presence was? More people had gathered around us. Some were discreetly recording with their phones. Margaret, please, Daniel pleaded. People are staring at us. We can discuss this in private. In private? Like when you discussed my future in private, without including me? Benjamin appeared at my side with a folder. Mrs. Margaret, would you like me to show them the documents now? What documents? Victoria asked nervously. The documents that prove that the house you've been living in for these 5 years is legally mine, I replied calmly. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel looked as if he had been slapped. What are you saying? I'm saying that when your father died, he left that property in a trust under my name. You can live there as long as I'm alive and I consent, but technically, legally, the house is mine. Victoria staggered. That can't be true. Benjamin opened the folder and showed the documents. These are the trust papers, duly registered and notarized. Mrs. Margaret is the legal owner of the property. Daniel took the documents with trembling hands. But I thought, Dad told me the house would be mine. Your father told you that you could live there and take care of me. That's not the same as being the owner. An elegant woman who had been listening came closer. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Julia Vance, from the city's financial newspaper. Would you be willing to give an interview about your story? Of course, I replied. I think it's important for people to know what can happen to senior citizens when family makes the wrong assumptions. Daniel grabbed my arm. Mom, please don't make this public. We can sort this out among ourselves. I gently freed myself from his grip. Like when you sorted out my future among yourselves, without consulting me, without including me, treating me like an object to be disposed of. It wasn't like that? Victoria shouted, completely losing her composure. We took care of you for 5 years. We gave you a roof over your head, food, everything you needed. You gave me? My voice turned icy. You gave me a roof over my head in my own house? The murmur of indignation from those present was audible. Several were clearly on the side of the elegant older woman who had been betrayed by her own family. Mrs. Margaret, the journalist said, what are your plans now? Very simple, I replied with a smile. I am going to live my life on my own terms, in my own home, with my own money. And I am going to make sure my story serves as a warning to other seniors who may be in similar situations. Daniel looked completely defeated. And what about us? Where are we going to live? That, I said as I walked towards the exit, is an excellent question. One you should have asked yourselves before you planned on sending me to a nursing home. The following days were a whirlwind of media activity. The story of the betrayed millionaire grandmother had gone viral on social media. The videos from the event had been shared thousands of times, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests. But the most satisfying part was watching Daniel and Victoria try to manage their public image. Victoria had created an Instagram account where she tried to tell her side of the story. People don't understand, she said in her tearful videos. We love Margaret like family. We only wanted what was best for her. Modern nursing homes are beautiful places where seniors can socialize and receive professional care. Her followers didn't believe a word of it. The comments were ruthless. Without consulting her? At 2 in the morning? That's not love, it's abuse. And why didn't you know she had money? Weren't you interested in actually getting to know the woman you lived with? My grandmother always says, the family that betrays you once will betray you always. I do's. Daniel had opted for a different strategy. He had started calling me directly, leaving increasingly desperate messages. "Mom, this is getting out of control. Victoria is getting threats online. People recognize us on the street and insult us. Please, say something publicly to calm things down." Calm things down? After 5 years of humiliation, they wanted me to defend them publicly? The message that struck me the most arrived a week after the event. "Mom, we lost our jobs. Victoria was fired because the story reached her office. I was asked to resign because my family situation was affecting the company's image. We don't have money to pay rent if we have to move. Please help us." Help them. Funny how their tone changed when they needed something. That afternoon, I had the most important interview scheduled so far. The most watched morning television show in the country. Julia had arranged for it to be live, from my penthouse, to showcase my new life. I prepared carefully: a violet dress, elegant jewelry, perfect makeup. When the camera crew arrived, my apartment looked like something out of a decorating magazine. We're live in 3, 2, 1. Good morning. I'm Julia Vance, and I'm here with Margaret Vance, the woman whose story has moved the entire country. Margaret, tell us, how do you feel after everything that has happened? Julia, I feel free for the first time in 5 years. Free to live without apologizing for existing. Free to make my own decisions. Free to be treated with the respect I deserve. Your daughter-in-law Victoria has been giving interviews saying that you only wanted to protect her, that the nursing home was for your well-being. Julia, when someone plans your future without consulting you secretly in the middle of the night, that's not protection, that's control. And when they have also been treating you like a burden for years, it's hard to believe their motives were truly altruistic. What would you say to other seniors who might be going through similar situations? I would tell them that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, that you shouldn't let anyone make you feel like a burden, and above all, to maintain control over your own lives and finances. Now, we understand that your son Daniel has been trying to contact you. Yes, he has been calling, especially since they lost their jobs. And what do you plan to do about it? Look, Julia, I'm not a vengeful person, but I'm not a foolish person either. For 5 years, Daniel and Victoria treated me as if I were invisible when they thought I depended on them. Now that they've discovered I have my own resources, suddenly I'm important again. Are you willing to reconcile with them? A real reconciliation requires a genuine acknowledgement of the harm caused. It requires sincere apologies, and it requires real changes in behavior. So far, all I've received are excuses and justifications. Victoria says the consequences have been disproportionate, that losing their jobs is too much of a punishment. Disproportionate? My voice hardened slightly. You know what's disproportionate? Planning to commit someone without their consent, that is disproportionate. What are your plans for the future? I'm considering creating a foundation to help seniors facing family abuse. I want my experience to serve to protect others. One last question. Margaret, do you regret anything? I thought carefully before answering. I regret allowing them to treat me badly for so long. I regret wasting 5 years feeling like a burden, when in reality I was an independent and capable woman. But I do not regret taking back control of my life. When the interview ended, my phone exploded with messages. Hundreds of people sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking out, offering support. But the message that caught my attention the most came from an unknown number. Mrs. Margaret, this is Stephen Clark, an investigative journalist. I have information about your son's finances that I think you would be interested in knowing. Could we talk? I smiled as I dialed the number. Daniel and Victoria hadn't seen anything yet. The meeting with Stephen was revealing in ways I hadn't expected. He arrived at my penthouse with a folder full of documents and a serious expression that immediately put me on alert. Mrs. Margaret, after your television interview, I decided to investigate your family's situation more deeply. What I found is disturbing. He sat across from me in the living room and opened the folder on the glass table. For the last 5 years, Daniel and Victoria have been using your presence in the house to obtain credits and loans they couldn't have gotten otherwise. What do you mean exactly? They submitted documents declaring you as a financially dependent person with mental health issues. This allowed them to access government assistance programs, tax deductions for elder care, and preferential loans. My blood began to run cold. They financially benefited from pretending I had mental problems? Exactly. Here are the tax returns for the last 3 years. They received deductions for medical expenses that never existed, subsidies for elder care they never really provided, and several loans they justified by saying they needed the money for your care expenses. I reviewed the documents in disbelief. There were fake medical bills, receipts for medications I had never taken, even reports from a psychiatrist who was supposedly treating me for senile dementia. How did you get all this? I have contacts in various institutions. When a story like yours becomes public, sometimes people who were previously silent decide to speak up. Stephen pulled out more papers. But there's something more serious. Victoria has been running a blog for 2 years where she documents her heroic struggle caring for her mother-in-law with dementia. He showed me printouts of the blog. The title was Living with Margaret, a devoted daughter-in-law's diary. I read some entries with growing horror. Today, Margaret had another episode. She couldn't remember where she put her medicine and blamed me for hiding it. It's so hard to stay patient when the illness makes her so aggressive. Daniel is exhausted. Working all day and then coming home to deal with his mother's mood swings is wearing him down. But we carry on, out of love. The doctors say Margaret's condition is only going to get worse. We're considering professional care options. It's heartbreaking, but perhaps it's for the best for everyone. Is all of this made up? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Completely fabricated. But here's the interesting part. The blog has generated income. It has sponsors, affiliate links, even a donation account to help with Margaret's medical expenses. How much money have they made from this? Approximately $15,000 over the last 2 years. I was speechless. They hadn't just planned to get rid of me. They had been profiting from lies about my mental health for years. There's more, Stephen continued. Victoria also created a profile on a crowdfunding platform 6 months ago. They were raising money to renovate the house and make it safer for a person with dementia. How much did they raise? $8,000 so far. It was too much. I got up from my seat and walked to the window. The city view that usually calmed me now felt blurred by rage. What can I do legally with this information? A lot. Fraud, swindling, misappropriation, defamation. We could build a solid case that could result in criminal charges. My phone rang at that moment. It was Daniel, probably calling for the 15th time that week. This time I decided to answer. Yes? Mom, thank God you answered. We need to talk urgently. I'm busy, Daniel. Mom, please. Victoria is having panic attacks. The harassers online are posting our address. Last night someone threw eggs at the house. What a shame. Mom, we are your family. You can't be okay with this happening to us. My family? The family that diagnosed me with senile dementia without my knowledge to obtain financial benefits? A long silence. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Victoria's blog. I'm talking about the false tax returns. I'm talking about the loans you got by lying about my mental condition. Mom, I don't know anything about that. You don't know anything about the blog Living with Margaret, where your wife documents my supposed dementia episodes? You don't know anything about the donations you've been receiving for my medical care? You don't know anything about the fake medical bills you submitted to get tax deductions? This time the silence was deafening. Daniel, I have an investigative journalist sitting right here with documents that prove everything I've just said. Do you want to keep lying? Mom, if there was anything irregular, it was Victoria's idea. I didn't know the details. You didn't know the details of stealing money using my name? You didn't know the details of inventing a mental illness I don't have? Victoria said it was legal. She said that since you lived with us, we were entitled to those benefits. And the blog? Was it also legal to lie publicly about my mental health to make money? Mom, I didn't read the blog. Victoria handled those things. Daniel, do you know what the difference is between you and me? What? When I make a mistake, I own it and take responsibility. You, on the other hand, always find someone else to blame. Mom, please, can we fix this? No, Daniel, we can't. This gets fixed with justice. I hung up and looked at Stephen. When can we file the lawsuits? The lawsuits were filed on a Tuesday morning. Benjamin had worked all night to prepare the documents. Tax fraud, swindling, defamation, identity theft, and elder abuse. It was a legal arsenal that would leave Daniel and Victoria with no escape. But before the documents reached their hands, I had one last card to play. "Are you sure you want to do this publicly?" Stephen asked me as he set up the recording equipment in my living room. "Completely sure. The people who donated money believing Victoria's lies deserve to know the truth." We had decided to do a live broadcast on social media. In just 2 hours, more than 50,000 people had registered to watch. The story had captured the nation's attention. We're live in 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon. I am Margaret Vance, and today I am going to share information with you that will completely change what you thought about my family situation. I looked directly at the camera. Over the last few days, an investigative journalist has discovered that my son and daughter-in-law have been lying about my mental health for years to obtain financial benefits. I held up a copy of Victoria's blog. My daughter-in-law Victoria created a blog called Living with Margaret, where she invented a completely false version of my life. According to her writings, I suffer from senile dementia, have aggressive episodes, and require constant medical care. None of this is true. As you can see in this broadcast, I am in perfect mental condition. I manage my own finances. I live independently, and I make all my own decisions without help. I read one of the blog entries. Today, Margaret had another episode. She couldn't remember where she put her medicine and blamed me for hiding it. This entry is dated on a day I was in New York, closing a real estate investment. The live comments multiplied by the second. People were outraged. But the lie goes beyond the blog. Using these false stories, they obtained tax deductions for non-existent medical expenses, government subsidies for elder care they never provided, and donations from well-intentioned people who believed their narrative. I showed the tax documents. In total, they have obtained approximately $25,000 by lying about my mental condition. My phone started ringing insistently. It was Daniel, probably watching the broadcast in a panic. "I see my son is trying to call me right now," I said, showing the phone to the camera, probably to ask me to stop this broadcast. I decided to answer and put it on speaker. "Mom, please, stop that broadcast. You're destroying our lives." "Hello, Daniel. I'm live with 50,000 people. Is there anything you want to say publicly about Victoria's blog and the money you obtained by lying about my health?" "Mom, I didn't know you were live. Hang up right now." "Why should I hang up? Are you afraid of people hearing your side of the story?" "This is all Victoria's fault. I didn't know anything about the blog. She handled those things." The comments exploded. People couldn't believe he was blaming his wife live on air. "Daniel, so you admit that Victoria lied about my mental condition?" I don't know what to admit. Just stop the broadcast." "Do you admit that you received money under false pretenses?" "Mom, please." "It's a simple question, Daniel. Yes or no?" A long silence. Then we heard Victoria's voice, shouting in the background. "Hang up! Don't say anything else." "Is that Victoria?" I asked. "Does she want to join the conversation? I'm sure the 50,000 people watching us would have some interesting questions for her." "No!" Victoria screamed. "Daniel, hang up now." "Victoria," I said, raising my voice. "Could you explain to the audience why you invented stories about my dementia? Could you explain how you justify the money you earned with those lies? You have no right to ruin our lives like this." Victoria shouted, grabbing the phone. "I have no right? After you ruined mine for 5 years? We took care of you. We gave you a home." "Victoria, I'm reading your blog live. It says here I had a violent episode on March 15th. Could you explain what happened that day?" Because it turns out on that day, I was in Miami, visiting my investment broker. I have receipts, photos, witnesses. Those details don't matter. They don't matter? Lying about someone's mental health doesn't matter? You abandoned us? You disappeared in the night like a thief. "Victoria, I left because I overheard your phone conversation planning to commit me to a nursing home without my consent. It was for the best. The best for me, or the most convenient for you? The call was abruptly cut off. The comments went wild. People were virtually applauding, sharing the broadcast, expressing their support. As you can see, I continued calmly. It's hard to maintain lies when you're confronted with real evidence. This broadcast isn't just about my personal story. It's about something much bigger: the systematic abuse of senior citizens by family members who take advantage of their perceived vulnerability. Tomorrow, my lawyers will file formal lawsuits against Daniel and Victoria for fraud, swindling, and defamation. All the money they obtained fraudulently will be returned to the corresponding institutions and to the people who donated, believing their lies. But more important than legal justice is moral justice. I want my story to serve as a warning. Never let anyone take away your dignity, no matter how old you are or how vulnerable you may seem. Thank you for joining me today. I will keep you informed about the progress of the legal case. I ended the broadcast with over 80,000 viewers. My phone immediately exploded with messages of support, interview offers, and contacts from other seniors sharing their own stories. But the message that satisfied me the most came an hour later. It was from the crowdfunding platform, informing me that they had closed Victoria's account and frozen the funds pending distribution. Justice was finally beginning. 6 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my penthouse enjoying my morning coffee while reading the day's news. The front page of the local newspaper had a headline that made me smile. Couple sentenced to prison for fraud against a senior citizen. Daniel had received 2 years in prison. Victoria, as the mastermind of the scheme, had received 3.5 years. In addition, they would have to pay a $50,000 fine and perform community service in nursing homes once they completed their sentences. Justice had been complete and satisfying. But the most rewarding part was not their punishment, but what I had built with my freedom. The Margaret Vance Foundation for the Protection of Seniors had already helped over 200 people in situations similar to mine. We had established a helpline, free legal services, and a financial education program for older adults. My story had inspired changes in state legislation on elder abuse. It was now more difficult for family members to obtain fraudulent benefits, and there were stronger protections for vulnerable seniors. But perhaps most importantly, I had rediscovered myself. At 71, I had learned to dance salsa, taken painting classes, and traveled to places I had only dreamed of visiting. I had an active social life, true friends, and a renewed purpose. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Lauren, my real estate agent who had become one of my best friends. "Margaret, did you see the news? I just read about the sentencing." "Perfect." "No, not that. Did you see that Victoria tried to sell her story to a television production company?" I laughed. "Seriously? What story?" "The one about how she defrauded her mother-in-law and ended up in prison. Apparently, she wanted to make a series about the dark side of social media and how internet justice destroyed her life. The nerve. And what happened? The production company rejected the proposal after investigating the facts. Turns out they prefer stories with more sympathetic protagonists. That afternoon, I had an important meeting. I had decided to write a book about my experience, and my editor was coming to discuss the final details of the contract. "Margaret," she said as we reviewed the manuscript, "your story is powerful because it's real. There's no fictional revenge or magical justice. It's simply a woman who decided not to be a victim." That was exactly the message I wanted to convey. "Have you thought about making any contact with Daniel now that he's in prison?" "I've thought about it," I admitted, "but I've decided I have nothing to say to him until he shows real change. Empty apologies don't rebuild broken trust. And if he wanted to make amends when he gets out, he would have to start by fully acknowledging what he did, without excuses, without blaming Victoria. He would have to show that he understands the harm he caused, and he would have to accept that the relationship would never be the same." That evening, as I prepared dinner in my gourmet kitchen, I reflected on the journey I had taken. The woman who had escaped through the back door that morning had been a frightened victim. The woman cooking now was an empowered survivor. My story had proven something that many people forget. It is never too late to reclaim your life. I had learned that kindness does not mean being a doormat, that family love does not justify abuse, that age is not synonymous with vulnerability, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply to live well. My phone showed a message from a 68-year-old woman in Mexico who had seen my interview. "Mrs. Margaret, your story gave me the courage to confront my family. After 2 years of humiliation, I finally stood up for myself. Thank you for showing me that I deserve respect." Messages like that arrived daily. Each one reminded me why it had been worth making my story public. As I had dinner on my terrace, watching the city lights stretch to the horizon, I silently toasted to all the women who had found their voice after years of silence. Daniel and Victoria had thought they were discarding me like trash. Instead, they had freed me to become the best version of myself. On my desk was a photo of my late husband. I spoke to him as I did every night. "My love, I know you would be proud. I didn't let them turn me into a victim. I defended my dignity and helped others defend theirs." That night, before sleeping, I wrote in my journal, "I don't regret adopting Daniel when he was a child. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the cost of self-destruction." The next morning, I would have a new interview. Another opportunity to tell my story. Another chance to help someone who felt invisible in their own life. Because in the end, I had discovered that my true purpose was not to be the perfect mother or the accommodating mother-in-law. My purpose was to simply be Margaret, a whole, independent, and free woman.